My husband left me for his assistant, went bankrupt, and came back demanding I. The day my husband packed his bags to move in with a woman 22 years my junior, he told me I was an anchor weighing down his true potential. 14 months later, that same man stood on my front porch in the freezing Chicago rain, drowning in debt, completely broken, and demanding that I become his lifeboat. What he didn't realize, and what his family refused to accept, was that the woman he had abandoned no longer existed. I didn't just change the locks on my front door. I had changed the locks on my entire life. My name is Eleanor. I am 51 years old, and if there is a single undeniable truth I have learned from watching my 22-year marriage disintegrate, it is this. Never allow yourself to be a rehabilitation center for a man who broke himself while trying to build a life with someone else. For 2 decades, David and I were the definition of a partnership. Or so I thought. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. I worked as a senior underwriter for a regional bank, a job that demanded precision, consistency, and an ironclad grip on reality. David was the dreamer. He spent the last 7 years of our marriage building a logistics software startup in our guest bedroom while I paid the mortgage, covered the health insurance, and contributed to our 401(k)s. I bought the groceries, I fixed the leaky faucets, and I smiled politely at dinner parties when he talked endlessly about his vision. I was the soil that allowed his roots to grow. I made his life completely frictionless, believing that his success would be our success. Then came the miracle. In late October, David's company secured an $8 million series of funding round from a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. Overnight, everything shifted. The guest bedroom was replaced by a sleek downtown office. The reliable Honda Accord he drove was traded in for a Tesla. And suddenly, my practical, steady husband was wearing designer blazers and talking about synergy and lifestyle optimization. The first red flag wasn't a lipstick stain or a late-night phone call. It was a subtle, condescending shift in how he looked at me. When I reminded him to renew his life insurance policy, he rolled his eyes and said I was obsessed with the mundane. When I wore my comfortable sweaters around the house, he suggested I elevate my personal brand. Then, his phone became an extension of his hand. He changed his passcode. He started taking walking meetings at 9 p.m. The truth shattered my reality on a Tuesday evening. I had cooked a pot roast, an old recipe of my mother's, and the house smelled like the home we had built together for 22 years. David walked in, didn't take off his coat, and stood in the doorway of the kitchen. He had that tight, rehearsed look on his face, the kind a man gets when he's about to detonate a bomb in your living room and expects you to help clean up the debris. "I'm not happy, Eleanor," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I set the carving knife down. "Okay, let's talk about it. What's going on?" "It's not just a funk," he replied, his voice devoid of the warmth I had known for 2 decades. "I need to leave. I need space to figure out who I am now. This life. It reminds me of the struggle. You remind me of the struggle." I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I remind you of the struggle? David, I financed the struggle. I kept the lights on." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Her name is Chloe. She's my executive assistant. She understands the pressure I'm under. She sees the man I am becoming, not the man I used to be." Chloe. I knew exactly who she was. 26 years old. Fresh out of grad school. She had been working for him for exactly 4 months. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the plates against the wall. A strange, glacial calm washed over me. It was the instinct of an underwriter kicking in, assess the risk, mitigate the damage, close the file. "How long?" I asked. 3 months, he whispered. 90 days. 90 days of him eating the food I bought, sleeping in the sheets I washed, and lying to my face while he played billionaire with a girl practically young enough to be our daughter. "I think it's best if I get an apartment downtown," he said, puffing his chest out slightly, expecting me to beg him to stay, to ask if we could go to counseling, to ask what she had that I didn't. Instead, I walked over to the hallway closet, pulled out his large leather duffel bag, and dropped it at his feet. "You don't need space, David. You need to pack. You leave this house tonight, but you understand this clearly. There is no break. You are not putting me on a shelf while you test drive a 26-year-old. You walk out that door, you don't come back." He blinked, clearly rattled by my lack of hysteria. "Eleanor, don't be dramatic. I just need time." You have all the time in the world, I said, my voice eerily steady. Just not my time. Pack. He left an hour later. When his car pulled out of the driveway, I locked the door, slid down against the wood, and wept until I threw up. But by the time the sun came up, my tears were dry. Heartbreak is a luxury you can afford when you don't have a mortgage. I had bills to pay. 2 days later, I was sitting in the office of Diane Croft, the most ruthless family law attorney in Cook County. I laid out our financial history, the bank statements, the startup documents, and the mortgage papers. He's blinded by the money right now, Diane said, tapping her pen. Men like this think they're invincible when the first big check clears. We need to file for legal separation immediately and sever the finances. Right now. We drafted an ironclad separation agreement. When David received the papers, he didn't even fight them. In his arrogant, venture capital-fueled haze, he thought his startup shares were going to be worth $100 million. To protect his precious equity from me, he gleefully signed away his rights to our house, our modest savings, and my pension. He took his company, his Tesla, and his new life. I took the security I had paid for. It was a clean break. For the next 10 months, I watched from the periphery as David lived a life he couldn't afford. Through mutual friends and inescapable social media algorithms, I saw pictures of him and Chloe on vacations in Cabo, dining at Michelin-starred restaurants, and hosting lavish parties at his new penthouse. I went to work, paid down the principal on my mortgage, and started finding joy in the quiet. I repainted the living room. I learned how to garden. I started breathing again. Then, the twist came. The illusion shattered with the force of a wrecking ball. It started with a phone call from a mutual friend who worked in David's industry. The venture capital firm had initiated an emergency audit of David's startup. David wasn't just a visionary. He was financially illiterate. He had given Chloe unprecedented access to the company accounts. She hadn't just been spending his salary. They had been burning through the investors' operating capital to fund their lavish lifestyle. Worse, to keep the cash flow looking healthy, David had stopped paying the company's payroll taxes for 3 consecutive quarters. In the United States, you can mess with a lot of people, but you do not mess with the IRS. Payroll tax evasion pierces the corporate veil. The IRS can and will come after the founder personally. Overnight, the VC firm pulled out. The board fired David from his own company. The startup collapsed into bankruptcy, and Chloe, sweet, understanding, seized the real me. Chloe packed her designer bags and vanished the moment the company credit cards were declined. I heard this through the grapevine and felt a cold shiver of vindication, but I stayed silent. It wasn't my circus anymore. Until his mother cornered me in the floral department of Whole Foods a month later. Beatrice was a woman who believed her son was the second coming. When David left me, she had told me, "Well, Eleanor, successful men have needs. You were always a bit rigid." Now, she looked 10 years older, her hands trembling as she grabbed my shopping cart. "Eleanor, thank God," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "You have to help him. David has lost everything. The IRS is garnishing his wages. He had to sell the car. He's sleeping on my couch, and he's so depressed he won't eat. You need to let him come home." I stared at her, genuinely astounded by the audacity. "Beatrice, he doesn't have a home with me. We are legally separated. The divorce is finalized next month." Her face contorted into a mask of righteous indignation. "You took vows before God. In sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. He is at rock bottom, Eleanor. He was confused, he made a mistake, and that awful girl took advantage of him. He is your husband." "He remembered he was my husband a little too late," I replied, pulling my cart free from her grip. "He chose his path, Beatrice. Now he gets to walk it. Do not approach me in public again." I walked away, my hands shaking, but my spine straight. 2 nights later, the storm finally hit my doorstep. It was pouring rain, the kind of torrential Midwestern downpour that floods basements and snaps branches. I was sitting by the fire, reading a book with my newly adopted golden retriever, Max, asleep at my feet. The doorbell rang. Not once, but 3 frantic, desperate times. I pulled up the security camera app on my phone. There, illuminated by the harsh glare of the porch light, was David. He was soaked to the bone, wearing a cheap windbreaker, holding a single duffel bag, the same one I had thrown at his feet 14 months prior. He looked hollowed out, his face pale and aged, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat. My heart did a strange, painful flip. For 22 years, my instinct had been to protect this man, to fix his problems, soothe his anxieties, and make the world gentle for him. The ghost of that instinct whispered in my ear, urging me to open the door, grab a towel, and make him tea. I took a deep breath, killing the ghost. I pressed the microphone button on the app. "What are you doing here, David?" He jumped, looking wildly at the doorbell camera. "Eleanor? Please. Let me in. It's freezing. We need to talk." "There is nothing to talk about. Go back to your mother's house." "I can't." His voice cracked, raw and pathetic. "We got into a massive fight. She doesn't understand. She's driving me crazy. Eleanor, please. I have nowhere else to go. I'm drowning. I owe the IRS nearly $400,000. The company is gone. Chloe is gone. I have nothing. Please, just open the door. Let me come home." I stood up, walked into the hallway, and opened the wooden door, leaving the heavy glass storm door locked between us. He looked at me through the glass like a stray dog begging for scraps. "This isn't your home, David," I said, my voice carrying through the glass. "I made a mistake," he sobbed, placing his hands against the wet glass. "The biggest mistake of my life. I was stupid. I was under so much pressure, and I let it get to my head. I thought she loved me, but she only loved the money. You were the only one who ever truly loved me. You're my rock, Ellie. Please. I need my wife." The manipulation was so thick it was almost suffocating. He wasn't apologizing because he missed me. He was apologizing because the world had chewed him up and spit him out, and he remembered that I was a soft place to land. He wanted his maid, his accountant, his therapist, and his ATM back. "You didn't make a mistake, David," I said, looking him dead in the eyes. "Leaving your keys in the car is a mistake. Forgetting to pay the electric bill is a mistake. What you did was a choice. You chose to sleep with your assistant. You chose to lie to me for 3 months. You chose to pack this bag and walk out that door because you thought you had outgrown me. You didn't outgrow me. You outgrew your own character." "I'll do anything," he pleaded, the rain pasting his thinning hair to his forehead. "We can go to therapy. I'll sleep on the couch. I just need a place to stay while I get back on my feet. We can rebuild." "No." The word was a complete sentence. Solid. Immovable. His face shifted, the desperation morphing into something darker, something panicked and resentful. And then came the twist I had prepared for, the ugly truth hiding beneath his apologies. "You can't just leave me out here," he shouted, his tone turning vicious. "I have a right to this house. My name is on the deed. I need to force a sale. I need my half of the equity to pay the IRS, so I don't go to federal prison, Eleanor. You owe me this. I built that equity with you." I looked at him, feeling nothing but a cold, clinical pity. "David, you really should have read the separation agreement before you signed it." He froze, his hands slowly slipping off the glass. "What?" "When you thought your startup was going to make you the next Elon Musk, you signed a post-nuptial separation agreement," I explained slowly, as if speaking to a slow child. "You waived all claims to this property, the savings accounts, and my pension in exchange for me waiving my rights to your company's shares and future earnings. We filed it with the court 11 months ago. This house is in a trust in my name alone. You own absolutely nothing here." His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror as the reality of his arrogance finally caught up to him. He had been so greedy, so certain of his newfound superiority, that he had signed away his only safety net. You tricked me," he stammered, stepping back. "No," I replied calmly. "I protected myself from you. The IRS cannot touch this house, and neither can you. Your debts are entirely your own, incurred after our legal separation date. You wanted freedom without consequences, David. Now you have both. Eleanor, they are going to garnish every paycheck I earn for the rest of my life. I'll be working at a grocery store until I'm dead. You're going to let them destroy me." "I'm not letting them do anything," I said, stepping back into the warmth of my home. "You destroyed yourself. I highly suggest you call an Uber before you catch pneumonia." "You cold, heartless bitch," he screamed, kicking the bottom of the storm door. I gave you 20 years of my life. And I gave you 22, I countered softly. But I'm keeping the rest for myself. I turned off the porch light, plunging him into darkness, and walked away. I didn't look back, even as I heard him sobbing on the front steps, crying out against a universe that had simply given him exactly what he asked for. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. David didn't even show up to the hearing. His court-appointed attorney represented him. I walked out of the courthouse, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. I felt lighter than I had in a decade. I heard updates about him occasionally, mostly through the grapevine of neighborhood gossip that I no longer participated in. He was renting a small room in a run-down part of town. He was working as a mid-level logistics dispatcher, a job he thought he was too good for 20 years ago, with 25% of his paycheck being seized by the federal government every 2 weeks. His mother had to take out a second mortgage on her own home to help pay his legal fees, fracturing their relationship beyond repair. As for me, life became wonderfully, beautifully boring. I adopted a second dog. I started taking weekend trips to the lake, completely alone, waking up whenever I wanted, eating whatever I pleased. A few months ago, I met a man named Thomas at a local hardware store. He's a retired high school history teacher who builds birdhouses in his spare time. He is grounded, kind, and doesn't know the meaning of the word synergy. We have dinner on Thursdays, and he respects the fact that my home is my sanctuary. When women in my age group hear my story, they often ask me how I had the strength to shut the door on a man I loved for over 2 decades, especially when he was at his lowest point. They wonder if I feel guilty. I tell them what I learned the hard way. Some doors don't close because you are angry or bitter or seeking revenge. Some doors close because you finally realize that the person knocking is carrying a match, and you are tired of being burned down just to keep them warm. David thought he was leaving a prison to find his freedom. He didn't realize until it was too late that I wasn't his warden. I was the walls that kept the wolves out. And when he tore those walls down, the wolves didn't come for me. They came for him. My house is quiet now. My finances are secure. And my door remains firmly, permanently locked.